Welcome to class for this very brief lecture, Prelude to the Reformation, Part 1, the Great Western Schism. The Great Western Schism occurred in the Western Church after the Great Schism, which we talked about previously, that happened in 1054 AD. You see, by this point, the Roman Catholic Church had become essentially divided because of the ethnic interests in the church. The Catholic Church had become divided by the powerful French and, of course, the Italians. Mainly, Italians were the ones to send their people to the papacy. The French actually also wanted a French pope. And they wanted to move the papacy to France because, frankly, France is nicer than Rome. Even most Romans will tell you that, by the way. The Italians, of course, wanted to continue to have an Italian pope. And so when the previous pope died, Pope Urban VI is elected. He's an Italian, and of course this makes the French not real happy. To make things even more difficult, and by the way, in case you don't know the way that this works, when a pope dies or when he resigns, which doesn't happen very often, the College of Cardinals then comes to choose the next pope. They do this by coming together, spending a lot of time praying, potentially doing politicking, and then, of course, voting by ballot. Well, after Pope Urban becomes the pope, he hopes to institute a majority of Italian cardinals, which means that there'll be a lot of Italian popes in the future. And so the French don't like this at all. They react by setting up a separate college of cardinals, and they elect their own pope. And then they attack Rome to take out the Italian pope with an army. But they fail, and so they take their elected pope, Pope Clement VII, which today the Catholic Church does not recognize as being legitimate. They move him to Avignon, France, where now all of a sudden we have two popes. Once again, today the Catholic Church only recognizes the Pope in Rome as the legitimate pope. And so by 1400, there is a split even in the Western Church. Thus we call this the Great Western Schism. In the map on your screen, you can see the parts of former Roman Empire that's divided and has its alliances to various different popes. To make things even more difficult, as we'll see, a third papacy emerges also in Italy. But of course, the Roman Catholic Church knows that when you confess the Nicene Creed, you confess that you believe in one holy, apostolic, and Catholic Church, not two. And so many recognize that there was a need to reconcile. And so the conciliar movement attempted to reconcile the church under one pope. And so they created a council, but because of the fact that some felt that it was too one-sided in favor of the Italians, a second council was asserted. And so now there were two councils trying to reconcile, and of course there were two different popes. And so then the Avignon Pope dies, and so now there's two councils and one pope. During this time, and this is a tragedy for church unity on so many levels, Constantinople was attacked, or threatened rather, by the Turks. And then Constantinople, of course, you have to realize at 1054, by this point in the 1400s, that was a long time ago, and they really want the armies of the West to come save them. They're even willing to pledge their loyalty to the papacy if they only knew which papacy to pledge to, because there's one now in France and there's one over there in Rome. So which one is it? And they're, like I said, willing to agree to papal supremacy. At the same time, the Second Council names Felix V as the second pope. So now we're back to two different councils and two popes. And then, like I said before, another papacy emerges in Pisa, you know, where the tower is leaning. Eventually, however, Felix does the right thing, renounces his position, and Rome becomes the undisputed papacy once again. Martin is seen by Pope unanimously by 418 AD. The folks in Constantinople hold off the advancing Turks for just a little while. You can see The diagram there on your screen, the one there in the middle is the one that the Roman Church today recognizes as the legitimate line of apostolic succession going back to St. Peter. And so these competing papacies were never true papacies. A few years later, the East, of course, doesn't get much help from the West, largely because the West is having all this infighting. The Eastern Empire finally does fall. Byzantium falls in 1453, and you can ask any Orthodox Christian, it's one of the most tragic years in all of Christian history. Indeed, I think we must look at this as Christians as a tragic year. For the ancient Byzantine Empire, where Christianity had largely remained unchanged in the majority and undisputed, going clear back to, well, really the time of Constantine, it comes to an end. And today in Constantinople, the number of Christians is very, very small. The Bishop of Constantinople has this little bitty office. He's not even allowed to go into the Hagia Sophia, which of course had been the largest church building from the time it was completed in the 500s to the 1450s, when of course it was taken over and turned into a mosque by the Muslims. Okay, so that's a very brief history of the Great Western Schism. Continue looking at the prelude to the Reformation in this week's lesson plans.